A sharp crack of a whip slices through the air inside the luxurious ballroom in Manhattan, and that sound changes everything. The elegant gala turns into a scene of public humiliation when a powerful magnate raises his hand against his own pregnant wife, never imagining that this night will mark the beginning of his downfall. She, Valerie Cruz, is no ordinary victim, but the woman who will transform her pain into the strength capable of collapsing his entire empire. What happens next is a story of pride, guilt, and redemption, where power comes face to face with justice. Believe me, you won't be able to imagine the ending until you live this story with us. Leave your comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to see many more thrilling stories. Beneath the crystal lamps of the Grand Hotel in the financial district, the laughter of the powerful sounds like an empty symphony. No one imagines that tonight, a pregnant woman will shatter the gilded silence of the city. The main ballroom shines brightly. Waiters move back and forth between tables decorated with fresh flowers. Glasses clink, and long gowns move like waves. Valerie Cruz, wearing a blue dress that tries to conceal her pregnancy, walks slowly, holding a small clutch bag. Every step seems an effort to maintain her dignity. She thinks of the promise her husband whispered to her that morning. "I won't leave you alone tonight." She looks around, but he is not by her side. Adrian Morales, an admired entrepreneur and host of the gala, smiles among bankers and executives. His deep voice blends with the soft jazz music coming from the patio. To his right is Lauren Hayes, his young assistant, dressed in dark red, radiant and confident. People watch them. They whisper. The photographer asks for a picture. Lauren leans on Adrian's arm, and the flash illuminates their closeness. Valerie, a few yards away, feels the sting of something she doesn't want to name. She sips some water. She tries to convince herself that she is just tired. A woman approaches her. She comments on how beautiful the night is, that the wine is excellent, that the city seems suspended in a dream. Valerie smiles politely, but her gaze drifts to the center of the room, where her husband talks with Lauren as if the rest of the world has disappeared. The clock marks 10:30. The master of ceremonies announces the start of the luxury auction. Valerie notices a slight dizziness. She approaches Adrian and whispers gently, "Adrian, I feel a little weak. Can we sit in the patio for a moment?" Lauren steps forward, smiles with precise politeness, and replies, "Mr. Morales, perhaps the lady is not accustomed to this type of event. Poor thing, she must be tired." The word poor cuts the air. Some guests turn their heads. There is a tense silence. Adrian looks at his wife with a mixture of annoyance and shame. He mutters through clenched teeth, "Valerie, don't make a scene, please." She takes a deep breath. She tries not to cry. She feels the baby move inside her like a warning. Lauren lowers her voice and adds, looking at Adrian with feigned sweetness, "Don't speak to her like that. She doesn't deserve your anger. She's just nervous." Then she puts her hand to her chest, sighs, and a few false tears slide from her perfectly made-up eyes. The gesture is so calculated that even the passing waiter pauses for a second. The murmurs begin. What an uncomfortable situation. Poor thing, the businessman's assistant. Adrian feels the ground moving beneath his feet, how his name is mixing with whispers and outside compassion. In his head, he only hears one phrase. He cannot look weak. He cannot lose control. His jaw tightens. His voice raises a half tone. "Valerie, please, behave. Everyone is watching us." She replies softly, "I just want to sit down for a moment. That's all." Lauren, with the precision of someone who measures every word, intervenes again. "Don't worry, Adrian. I'm fine, really. I don't want her to feel bad because of me." And she pretends to wipe a tear, leaning on his shoulder. The scene looks like a painting of false piety. Valerie remains motionless. She feels the heat of the gazes, a bitter taste in her mouth. The music seems to stop. Even the jazz is silent. Inside, something breaks. It is not anger, nor shame. It is the certainty that her voice no longer matters. A man from the back comments quietly, "Oh my God, what a tragedy." The air in the room thickens. Adrian, overwhelmed by discomfort, tries to smile, but his smile breaks before it's born. He sees Lauren's tissue, her moist eyes, and he believes he sees a reproach, a victim needing defense. In that instant, pride outweighs love. He turns to Valerie. His tone is cold. His gaze is hard. "You are embarrassing me, and you don't even realize it." Valerie feels her heart pounding in her throat. The tears she held back escape. Her breathing becomes shallow. The room spins slightly. Still, she takes a step back. She doesn't want to fall. Lauren advances a little, grasps Adrian's arm protectively, and says loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Don't be mad at her, Adrian. She doesn't mean it." The false compassion stirs the shame of the curious. Some look down, others await the next move. Adrian feels the blood burning in his temples, the sound of his name among the attendees, the rumor of the murmuring, the feeling of being judged. And within that pressure, the inner voice tells him he must impose order. Valerie tries to approach. She wants to speak to him privately, but he steps back. Lauren, in a trembling voice, adds, "Please don't worry about me. I just want things to calm down." Her act is perfect. The entire ballroom seems to believe her. Valerie observes the scene as if it were not her life, but a slow-motion film. She hears the clinking of a glass falling to the floor, the brief cry of a waiter who apologizes, and she feels an ancient weariness, the same one her mother carried on her shoulders when she said that silence was better than arguing. The music timidly returns. Someone plays a jazz chord. Valerie tries to speak again, but Adrian raises his hand, a gesture that seeks not contact, but distance. "Please stop. We've had enough of a spectacle." Lauren, again, lets a tear fall. People sigh. In that instant, the murmur of the room becomes an echo that Valerie doesn't understand. She hears scattered phrases, nervous laughter. The murmuring of those pretending not to look makes her realize she can't stay there, that she can't breathe. She decides to go to the patio, even though her legs are trembling. As she walks toward the door, she feels the gazes on her back, the fans that stop moving, the smell of red wine and expensive perfume. She reaches the edge of the ballroom, pauses for a second, and looks back. Adrian holds his glass. Lauren is at his side, the white tissue stained with fake tears. The air seems still. Valerie wants to believe that everything is a misunderstanding, that they can talk tomorrow. But something inside her goes cold. She crosses the threshold, and the patio air hits her face. A mix of jasmine and night coolness. She breathes heavily, leaning against the wall. Behind her, she hears applause. A voice announces the next item of the auction, a braided leather whip, a symbol of old-world tradition. She doesn't know it, but that object will witness her fall. She remains for a few seconds under the open sky, her hand on her belly, her heart trying not to break. Inside, Lauren raises her face to the lamp. The golden light caresses her profile, and a brief, icy smile crosses her lips. Valerie doesn't know that tonight will be the last night she is Adrian's wife. The sound of the music continues to pulse, but amidst the tunes and wine, Adrian Morales' fury is about to freeze New York City. The echo of what happened minutes ago persists like a glass splinter. The room remembers Lauren's impeccable tear, her velvet words in front of the guests, and the whisper she left for Valerie as she left for the patio, like a dark omen. The image returns again and again, pushing Adrian to an edge where pride rules. Calm dies, and the name is everything. The master of ceremonies raises his voice in a celebratory tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, item number 11. A handcrafted leather whip. Braided leather, silver rivets, a symbol of centuries of tradition." And the spotlight falls on the auction table. The leather shines as if breathing. A curved shadow is drawn on the white tablecloth. Some applaud out of habit, others lean in for a better look. The photographer adjusts the lens. A waiter freezes with a canapé tray. No one knows that the night is one heartbeat away from breaking. Valerie returns from the patio with a pale complexion, one hand on her belly, the other on the back of a chair. She tries to find her husband to ask him for 5 minutes of air. Her voice comes out almost in a whisper. "Adrian, please, let's talk for a moment." But the phrase falls without an echo. The businessman's eyes do not look at his wife. They look at the room that whispers with an appetite that hurts him. They look at Lauren, barely a step away. With the tissue still damp in a face of glass, they look at the whip consecrated by the spotlight, and in that triangle, judgment blurs. Blood rules, and pride pushes like an invisible bull. The presenter tries to joke about the craftsmanship of the leather. People barely laugh. The rumor grows. Valerie repeats in a gentle voice, "I'm dizzy. If we could just sit down." And Lauren leans in delicately. Her perfect diction floats above their heads. "Don't worry about me, Adrian. I'm fine. It just saddens me to see her so nervous." The emphasis on "so nervous" sounds like a public seal of judgment. And that seal bites Adrian's neck. He takes a determined step. His heel marks the marble. He approaches the table. He places his hand on the braided leather. He lifts it. The whip exhales a dark arc. A brief snap that doesn't hit anyone yet. It just splits the air. And the room, suddenly, breathes less. Valerie instinctively extends an arm. She doesn't touch the handle. She touches her husband's sleeve like a plea. "Don't do it," she whispers. "We have a child inside." And the word "inside" ignites another subliminal spark of shame in Adrian. He feels that they are demanding tenderness from him in front of witnesses, that they are pushing him to yield, that his name will be ruined if he hesitates now. He turns his face toward the crowd, and, with an icy calm, he utters, "If you wanted a spectacle, you're going to get one." The first lash gives no warning. It whistles, cutting the air with an animal sound, and falls diagonally onto Valerie's shoulder. There is no blood, but the dry, glass-like burst of the strike makes 2 or 3 guests gasp. The jazz music stops without being told to. Glasses vibrate with a faint hum. The humiliation enters like a dull knife that, without wounding the skin, hurts more deeply. Valerie doubles over. Her hand rolls to her belly with the absolute instinct of a mother. A brief moan pierces the dead music. She tries to straighten up. She sees light spots. She hears a fan snap shut in fury. Her throat rasps. "Adrian," she says. And his name offers her no refuge. Lauren, a step away, arches her eyebrows with porcelain pain. The tissue rises again like a white wing, and someone murmurs, "What a disgrace!" without clarifying who is to blame. Adrian tightens his fingers on the handle. He feels the leather obey him like a certainty. He sees heads together, pressed lips, phone lenses half raised. He perceives the cave of opinion, the judgment without a judge. The headline prepared for the morning. The second blow comes lower. Quick. The whip whistles again. It doesn't tear the dress. It barely nips it. It leaves a trail of fear. And the fear grows large. It runs through the corners. It climbs onto the lamp. It descends the marble columns. It sits at the table of the notables. A guest covers her mouth. Another clutches her purse. A waiter takes a step forward and stops. The master of ceremonies consults the technician, not knowing what to say. And Valerie, with hot eyes and a cold forehead, thinks, breathes, for him. She tries to say it, but only a thread comes out. "Please." Adrian doesn't hear the plea. He hears his last name in the saliva of others. He hears the business community breathing down his neck. He hears the city judging. He hears the false laugh of Lauren, who now looks down like a sad saint. And the third lash arrives with a sharper whistle. It grazes the fold of the dress. It leaves a line of burning that doesn't mark the skin, but marks the memory. And the memory, in that second, photographs the exact position of each guest. The trembling fingers, the pressed lips, the millimeter distance of Lauren from the man she claims to protect. Valerie backs up and trips over the edge of the rug. A glass falls at some table, spilling red wine like a stain pointing to someone without naming names. The room sounds like small pieces of glass breaking inside. She swallows. Nausea rises. Her world tilts. She looks for a chair. She doesn't want to sit down. She knows that sitting down would be the same as disappearing. She thinks of her simple New York apartment, her mother's voice, the smell of warm bread, the morning light that forgives, and she feels a low blow in her belly that is not the whip. It is the fear of inheriting fear. "We'll talk about it tomorrow," she says. She tries to build a bridge, but Adrian, with a tense face and eyes of stone, seeks the fourth blow. His hand traces the mechanical arc of someone who believes they are obligated not to yield. The leather goes up, the leather comes down, and in that second, from the back, a deep, clear voice bursts in like a lightning bolt without thunder. "Enough, Morales!" His arm freezes. The whip hangs like a defeated animal. The room breathes. Heads turn. The spotlight finds a tall man with discreet gray hair, a sober bow tie, and a steady gait. Mr. Julian Vance crosses the aisle of attention, not with haste, but with moral authority. He offers an open hand. He takes the handle. He doesn't rip it away. He retrieves it. He returns it to the table with a firm gesture that sounds like a final period. "No man has the right to turn his wife into a spectacle," he says without shouting. And the word spectacle suddenly shrinks the curious. A woman sits down. A young man lowers his phone. The photographer discovers himself with the camera hanging like a sign of guilt. Adrian looks at Julian with a hatred that doesn't quite ignite. He says, "This is my business," and the phrase falls onto the marble like a misplaced glass. Julian replies, "No, this is the business of dignity," and 2 or 3 consciences stand up inside. Valerie folds over herself. Her vision trembles. The world loses focus. Dizziness pushes her. Julian extends his arm, and she leans on him. A waitress brings water closer. Another offers a chair. Those who were spectators a second ago now want to be saviors, but they arrive late. Lauren makes her last acting move. She stands next to Adrian with the purest profile. Her eyes wet in a display, her mouth trembling, the tissue now dry, and that imposed purity catches sympathy, like someone picking up coins from the floor. Valerie takes a sip. The cold glass brings back her pulse. Her lips stammer. "Thank you," Julian whispers. "Breathe. It's over now." And that, "it's over now," pushes a crack of light into her darkness. The master of ceremonies coughs and announces that the auction will continue in the patio. If they please, no one applauds. Some chairs scrape. Suits seek doors. Heels draw an uncomfortable present. The lamp shines too brightly again. The perfume now smells like a mask. Adrian reaches out for the whip, as if a magnet were calling him. But no one consents. Lauren tries to touch his shoulder. He doesn't look at her. His jaw vibrates with a primal resentment. His eyes look for a place to hide. They don't find it. Julian maintains the posture of someone who doesn't abandon the victim halfway. Valerie tries to straighten up. She succeeds. She feels the weight of all the gazes. And yet, there is a seed of calm that is not forgiveness yet. It is dignity breathing. The exit opens. 6 feet of marble hallway separate her from the fresh air. The whip, lying on the tablecloth, looks like a sleeping snake. Its shine offends. Its silence accuses. The rumor recomposes itself into subdued conversations. Someone pretends that nothing happened. Another comments that it was a misunderstanding. A third person asks for a car. A fourth says, "Poor thing." No one knows if they are talking about the right one. Valerie takes a step. Julian accompanies her. The eyes of half the room fall to the floor. The rest look over their shoulders to convince themselves that it is not their problem. And then, very close, so low that it barely reaches anywhere, Lauren leans her body toward Adrian's face and drops a phrase like a signature on marble. "Every fall of an empire begins with a single, fake tear. The sunrise arrives at the simple Queens neighborhood with a thick silence, a silence that smells of freshly brewed coffee and dry shame. The streets are still asleep. The fire escapes with clothes hanging tremble with the first breeze. Valerie walks slowly down the street, heels in hand, her bare feet on the cold pavement. The blue dress, the same as the night before, now looks like a broken memory. The wrinkled fabric holds the smell of wine, fear, and something she can't name. Beside her, Julian Vance accompanies her without speaking, his face tense and his eyes tired, carrying a jacket he offered to cover her shoulders. "You'll be safe here," he murmurs, when they arrive in front of the brownstone of Teresa Vega, Valerie's mother, a house with red geraniums on the windows. The door opens before they can knock, and Teresa appears with an apron on, her hands wet from washing dishes. Her gaze travels from her daughter's pale face to the man accompanying her, and in a second, she understands more than anyone has said. "My daughter, for heaven's sake," she whispers, and wraps her in a hug that smells of soap and freshly toasted bread. Valerie falls into that embrace, like someone falling onto firm ground. Inside, the kitchen has the same order as always. A small table, 2 chairs, a radio on low volume, a pan with warm oil. Teresa pours coffee, sets it in front of her daughter, and sits down without speaking. The wall clock marks 8:30, and the sun begins to paint the tiles gold. Valerie tries to speak, but her voice catches. What she lived last night has no simple name. Teresa, without waiting for explanations, strokes her cheek. "You don't have to say anything. I already know." Julian, standing next to the window, watches the shadows in the courtyard. His figure commands effortlessly, but his gaze carries the weight of someone who has seen too much. "Mrs. Vega," he says respectfully, "what happened last night cannot stand." Teresa nods, but her voice sounds tired. "Here, family matters are washed with patience, not noise." Julian turns. His eyes lock onto Valerie's. "It's not noise, it's justice." She looks away. The coffee cools in her hands. For an instant, the silence is filled with memories. The girl who played in that same courtyard. The summers with the scent of jasmine. Adrian's laughter when he was still a kind boy who promised the sky. Teresa sighs. "He was always proud, but you also chose not to see it." Valerie feels the sting of the truth and replies barely with a thread of voice. "I thought love cured everything." Teresa looks at her for a long time and says, "Love doesn't cure what fear feeds." The words fall like a soft blow. Julian breaks the silence and takes a folded folder from his pocket. "There's something you should know," he tells Valerie, "and it has nothing to do with last night." The folder has been waiting for years. Inside are old documents, yellowed letters, a black and white photo of a man in a military uniform. "This is your father," Julian explains. "He worked with me many years ago. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't be alive." Valerie looks up, confused, and Teresa nervously clenches her apron. "Your father saved my life in the Vietnam War," Julian continues. "And when he died, he asked me to take care of his family if they ever needed it. Last night, when I saw you, I knew that moment had arrived." Valerie remains motionless, her mind intertwined between past and present. Teresa lowers her head, silent tears running down her cheeks. "For years I kept silent about that connection. I never wanted you to live looking back," the mother says. "But it seems the past has come to call us again." Valerie touches the photo. The look of that man feels both familiar and distant. "I don't know what to do," she murmurs. "I don't know if I want to remember." Julian sits across from her, his voice firm but gentle. "Remembering is the only way not to repeat." Outside, children play in the street. A neighbor waters the flower pots and sings a soft tune. Life goes on, indifferent. While inside the kitchen, a new direction is being decided. Teresa breaks the bread, wipes her tears, and says, "You'll stay here for a while, daughter. No one will touch you as long as I breathe." Julian nods, stands up, and leaves a card on the table. "I have a contact in Los Angeles. A friend who works at a women's support center. I can help you start over. Valerie hesitates. Los Angeles sounds like another planet, but something burns in her chest, a mixture of shame and a desire to breathe without fear. She looks at her mother and sees, for the first time, the weariness of a generation that learned to be silent. I don't want to be like you, Mom, she says without reproach. I don't want to survive by hiding. Teresa smiles sadly. Then live, daughter, and don't regret it. The sun enters through the window and bathes the table in a golden glow. Valerie gets up, goes out to the patio, and looks at the lemon tree her father planted before he died. The leaves move in the wind. The aroma of lemon and wet earth reminds her that there is still life. Julian approaches, places a hand on her shoulder. Your father would be proud of you. She feels it, but can't speak. She knows the worst is yet to come. Facing the press, the shame, the whispers, the Morales' name echoing throughout the city. However, for the first time since the night before, she feels something like calm in her chest. It is not oblivion. It is resistance. Thank you, she says slowly, for staying when everyone left. Julian replies, I am keeping a promise. When he leaves, Teresa and Valerie remain silent, listening as the echo of his footsteps fades down the street. The mother pours her more coffee and says, Men pass, but blood remains. Don't forget where you come from. Valerie looks at the photos on the wall. Her grandparents, her father, her younger mother, herself as a child in a white dress. She understands that her story does not end in shame, but in the decision to get up. The clock strikes 9:30. A voice on the radio announces the weather. Clear skies in the city. A chance of rain up north. Valerie rests her hands on the table and says with a new determination, Tomorrow, I'm going to Los Angeles. Teresa doesn't ask anything. She just takes her hand and says, Go, daughter. The world doesn't end in a last name. Outside, the river shines under the sun like a mirror, and for the first time in a long time, Valerie feels she can look into it without fear. Los Angeles greets her with a new kind of cold, different from the city. A cold that doesn't cut the skin, but cleanses the thoughts. The train arrives at Union Station at dawn. The platform is half empty, and Valerie gets off with a small suitcase, her mother's coat over her shoulders, and a letter from Julian folded in her pocket. The letter contains only an address and a phrase written in blue ink. Here, you will start anew. Outside, the city wakes up amidst orange lights, the sound of buses, the smell of roasted coffee, the murmur of footsteps. Valerie looks up and tells herself that Los Angeles doesn't know who she is, and that ignorance is her first gift. She calls a taxi. The driver looks at her in the rearview mirror and asks with a local accent, First time in the city? She barely smiles and replies, First time in a long time. The taxi drives along the highway. As the sun slowly rises between the buildings, bakery windows fill with freshly baked goods, and a slight wind lifts forgotten newspapers. On every corner, Valerie sees people rushing, women with colorful scarves, men with briefcases, young people with headphones. None of them look at her, and that anonymity feels beautiful to her. The car stops in front of an old sand-colored building with wrought iron balconies. On the doorway, a discreet sign says, Clara House, Women's Support Center. Valerie pays the fare, thanks the driver with a voice that trembles, and climbs the steps. A woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back and a warm smile, opens the door before she rings the bell. You must be Valerie, she says naturally. Julian told me about you. She nods, not knowing what to say, and the woman adds, I'm Clara. Come in, dear. The coffee is always fresh here. The interior smells of toasted bread and calm. On the walls, there are landscape paintings, dried flowers in glass jars, and a whiteboard with phrases written by other women. I am not afraid. Dignity is not lost. It is regained. Valerie places her suitcase on the floor, sits down, and feels the weight of her body. Clara serves her a cup, sits across from her, and asks without insisting, Do you want to tell me something? Or would you prefer we talk about the weather? I fell, Valerie replies with a fragile gesture, and then says, "The weather, for now." Clara laughs, a serene laugh, without harmful curiosity, and says, "In Los Angeles, winter always seems longer than it is, but it passes, like everything else." The phrase floats in the air like a bomb. A few hours later, Valerie goes up to the small room they assigned her. A simple bed, a window that overlooks the inner courtyard, a table with a plant. On the windowsill, a cat dozes in the sun. She opens her suitcase and takes out the photo of her father. She places it next to the lamp, and as she does so, she feels like she is founding something. A minimal life, but hers. From the street come children's voices, the sound of a guitar, the call of a street vendor. Everything seems ordinary, and yet, for her, it is a victory. She lies down on the bed, looks at the ceiling, and whispers, "You haven't defeated me," not knowing if she is talking to Adrian or her fear. The days pass slowly, filled with new routines. At Clara House, mornings begin with sewing, writing, and shared silence workshops. Valerie learns to listen without feeling judged, to speak without fear of her voice trembling. There are women from everywhere. A Peruvian woman who fled an abusive husband, a young woman from the Midwest with a 3-year-old son, an older woman who says that the heart gets used to blows if you don't teach it to beat again. Each story touches her like a fragmented mirror, and slowly the pieces of her own begin to fit together. In a notebook that Clara gives her, she writes one phrase each night, only one. The first says, "My body is not shame." The second, "My voice does not need permission." Clara, who observes without interrupting, tells her one day while serving soup. When a woman starts writing her story, she has already won half the battle. Valerie nods, and for the first time since the gala, she feels hungry, not just for food, but for life. She goes out to walk the streets of the neighborhood, buys bread, leaves a tip at the cafe. She learns to say thank you without lowering her gaze. One afternoon, in front of a storefront, she sees a brief news segment on TV. The businessman, Adrian Morales, is under investigation for assault and abuse. The image shows the Grand Hotel, the red carpet, the flashes. Her heart pounds in her chest, but she doesn't feel fear, only a clean sadness, like someone attending a necessary burial. She doesn't sleep that night. She goes out to the patio with a blanket over her shoulders. The Los Angeles sky has a metallic sheen. The stars seem farther away than in the city. Clara appears silently with 2 cups of tea and sits beside her. "I saw it on the news," she says frankly. Valerie nods. "I don't want him locked up. I want him to understand," she murmurs. Clara replies, "Sometimes understanding is the greatest condemnation." They remain silent. The steam from the tea mixes with the cold air. In that silence, Valerie remembers Julian's words. Remembering is not repeating, and she promises herself not to forget. The next day, she receives a letter. The envelope bears the letterhead of a law firm. Inside, a brief note. There are still accounts from the past you should know about. She recognizes Julian's handwriting. She sighs. She knows the path to peace is not over. On the table, her notebook waits. She writes a new phrase. "I have survived, but I still have to live." She looks out the window. The cat watches her with half-closed eyes, and she smiles. For the first time in a long time, the word hope doesn't sound foreign to her. Outside, the murmur of Los Angeles continues its course, but inside her, silence has become a refuge. The weeks in Los Angeles begin to find a rhythm, a pulse of its own that Valerie learns to follow as if it were the beat of a new song. Clara House has become her refuge and her school, a place where time is not measured by clocks, but by breaths. Every morning smells of freshly baked bread, coffee with cinnamon, and soft conversations between women trying to rebuild themselves from the debris. In the living room, voices mingle with the radio. Someone laughs, another cries in silence, and Clara, always firm, says that every tear is also a beginning. Valerie, sitting in front of the window, writes in her notebook. The fear doesn't disappear, but she learns to sit away from it. The Los Angeles winter stretches out with gray days. Valerie begins therapy with a young psychologist named Nuria, who speaks with tenderness and firmness at the same time. In the first session, Nuria invites her to close her eyes and breathe. I don't want you to forget, she says. I want you to remember without it hurting. Valerie hesitates, but obeys. At first, the words don't come out. They get caught in her throat. Then they arrive in bursts, as if releasing themselves. She talks about the fear, the nights without a voice, the blow that hurt not only her skin, but her dignity. Nuria listens and takes few notes, more attentive to the tone than the facts. Your voice is tired, she says. We're going to give it strength back. That phrase becomes her mantra. Every day Valerie gets up, looks at herself in the mirror, and repeats softly, I have the right to speak. At Clara House, the afternoons are quieter. The women sew, paint, or simply drink tea. Clara plays classical music, and sometimes an old flamenco record. One of the residents, a woman named Rosalia, teaches Valerie to clap and follow the rhythm. The body speaks too, Rosalia says. If you listen to it, it stops trembling. And so, little by little, Valerie begins to move again. One afternoon, Clara organizes a meeting where each woman must read something she has written. Valerie resists. She says her handwriting is clumsy, that she has nothing to tell. But when her turn comes, she opens the notebook and reads a brief sentence. I lost my voice the day I stopped believing in myself. The room falls silent, and then a soft, respectful applause fills the space. Valerie smiles without knowing why. She feels something inside her settle. The following days pass between walks in the park and writing classes. In the park, Valerie stops in front of the pond and observes the reflection of the bare trees. A little girl runs after a pigeon, and her laughter cuts the air. Valerie closes her eyes, lets the wind caress her face. She no longer feels the same pressure in her chest, although the fear is still there, smaller, more domesticated. One morning, she receives an unexpected call. It's Julian. I just wanted to know how you are, his voice says on the other end. Breathing, she answers. He laughs softly. Sometimes that's already a lot. He tells her that the legal process against Adrian is moving forward, that there are witnesses, that the press has changed its tone. Valerie thanks him, but doesn't ask more. She hangs up and keeps looking at the phone. There is no joy, only a weariness that finally seems to make sense. That night she dreams of the hotel, the sound of the whip, the silence of the glasses, Adrian's cold gaze. She wakes up with a scream that doesn't quite escape. She gets up, walks to the window, and opens the blinds. Los Angeles sleeps under the rain. The lights of the cars reflect on the asphalt like snakes of fire. On the foggy glass, she writes with her finger, I am still here. She knows it's not a victory, but an affirmation. Fear still visits her, but it no longer rules. In mid-March, Clara proposes that she participate in a therapeutic theater workshop. Valerie refuses at first. She fears that everyone will look at her, that her voice will break. But she finally accepts. In the first class, the exercise consists of shouting her own name. The other women do it without difficulty. When her turn comes, her throat closes. Nuria, who also participates, approaches and whispers to her. You don't have to shout it loud. It just has to sound true. Valerie takes a deep breath. She looks at the floor and says slowly, Valerie. Her voice trembles, but it doesn't break. The others applaud. Clara smiles from the back and says, There it is, dear. There's your strength. Days pass, and the theater becomes a ritual. In one of the scenes, she must represent a woman who says goodbye to fear. She doesn't need to act. She closes her eyes and imagines leaving behind a hotel full of false lights, a man with clenched fists, and a future that no longer belongs to her. At the end of the session, tears run down her face, but they are not tears of sadness. they are of relief. In April, flowers begin to fill the parks, and with them comes the news that the trial will be held in California. Clara finds her in the dining room with the summons letter in her hand. "Are you going to go?" she asks. Valerie looks up and replies, "Yes." Her voice doesn't tremble. "This time, I won't be silent." Clara takes her hand and says, "Then you have already won." That night, Valerie sits in front of the mirror and observes herself in silence. Her eyes have dark circles, but also light. She puts on some music, a guitar melody that reminds her of the quiet patio. She thinks of her mother, Julian, and all the women at Clara House, and she feels a gratitude that fills her chest. She looks at herself and murmurs, "I am alive, and that is enough for today." Outside, the city breathes. Los Angeles, with its lights and shadows, has adopted her. In the reflection of the glass, she sees a woman who is no longer hiding, and for the first time in a long time, she recognizes herself. Adrian Morales hasn't slept in weeks. In the empty house in Beverly Hills, the echo of footsteps resounds like a never-ending judgment. The daily newspapers pile up on the desk, all with his name in headlines that smell of shame. LA businessman, accused of public assault on pregnant wife. The photos of the hotel, the frozen glasses, the whip shining under the light, his gesture distorted by anger. In every image, he sees himself turned into what he swore he would never be. He opens a bottle of whiskey, not for pleasure, but to silence the voices drilling into his head. From the window, he sees the coast, indifferent, slowly moving, as if the ocean were also washing away his past. The scent of Lauren still lingers in the living room, a trace of sweet flowers that irritates him. She hasn't returned since the night of the scandal, but her shadow is still there, on the cushions, in the mirrors. Adrian remembers her twisted smile as the press devoured him. He remembers how she cried in front of the cameras with the perfection of a consummate actress, saying she only tried to separate two people who loved each other. The world believed her. He, on the other hand, was branded, judged, and reduced to a monster. He sits down, opens his laptop, and searches his own name. Hundreds of articles, comments, insults. He closes the screen with a sharp slam and murmurs, "It wasn't my fault." But the echo answers him. Yes, it was. That morning, his lawyer calls, his voice dry. No pleasantries. "The preliminary hearing will be in Los Angeles." Adrian clenches his teeth. Los Angeles. He repeats in a tone that mixes rage and fear. "She's there." "Yes," the lawyer confirms. "And she will testify." The subsequent silence weighs like lead. Adrian hangs up without saying goodbye. He gets up, walks to the mirror, and looks at himself. His face is swollen, dark circles under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled. For the first time in years, he doesn't recognize himself. He tells himself, "They took everything from me." But deep down, he knows he lost it himself. He decides to travel a few days before the trial. He takes the late train, the car almost empty. Outside, the landscape passes like a mirage. The sun hides behind the mountains. In his briefcase, he carries documents, clothes, and the letter he never sent. An apology written with words he doesn't know if he believes. In the car, a small girl plays with her mother. Adrian watches her out of the corner of his eye. The sound of her laughter causes a knot in his throat. He thinks of the son he could have had, the one he might no longer have. He closes his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, feels a real fear. Fear of facing not justice, but Valerie. He arrives in Los Angeles at night. The air is colder, heavier. He takes a taxi to the hotel and passes by the courthouse, illuminated like a cathedral. The driver, an older man, tries to make conversation. "Business?" Adrian nods vaguely. He can't say he's coming to face the disaster of his life. At the hotel, the receptionist recognizes him and gives him a fleeting look. "Welcome, Mr. Morales," she says with professional courtesy, but her eyes hold a mixture of curiosity and pity. He signs, gets in the elevator, enters the room, and collapses on the bed. The television is on the news channel. They talk about a domestic violence case, another similar story. He changes the channel, but the theme pursues him, as if the universe were returning what he denied. The next morning, he receives a text from an unknown number. "You can't hide from what you did." He deletes it without answering, but the words burn him. He goes out for a walk downtown, passes through the main square, watches people entering and leaving the shops, couples kissing without fear. Everything seems normal, except him. He crosses the main street. He stops in front of a storefront where a TV shows the news of the upcoming hearing. His name appears next to Valerie Cruz. Her image entering Clara House leaves him paralyzed. She doesn't look like the same woman as before. There is strength in her gaze, calm in her posture. He feels a strange mixture of pride and rage. He murmurs, "So she's not afraid of me anymore." That night, returning to the hotel, Lauren is waiting for him. She's in the lobby, impeccable, with a wool coat and red lipstick. He stops, surprised. "What are you doing here?" he asks. She smiles and replies, "I came to help you." Adrian frowns. "Help me? You?" "We need to talk," she says, and gets into the elevator without waiting for an answer. In the room, Lauren takes off her gloves and sits on the armchair. "Are they tearing you apart?" she begins. "And you pushed me into the abyss," he replies. Lauren looks at him without blinking. "I warned you Valerie was weak, and now she ruined you. I can clean up your image, but I need something in return." He watches her, incredulous. "In return for what?" "For giving me back what's mine, my position, my money, my place." Adrian laughs without humor. "There is no place for anyone anymore." Lauren gets up, approaches, and whispers, "Then you'll sink alone." She leaves, leaving her perfume in the air. Adrian drinks directly from the bottle, his mind spinning. He looks at the letter on the table. He opens it. He reads it one more time. "I'm sorry, Valerie. I failed to be who I promised." He folds it. He puts it in his pocket. Deep down, he knows no apology is enough, but he also knows that silence would be worse. He looks out the window, the city illuminated like a board of fire, and he feels the weight of the upcoming trial. In his chest, there is no clean regret, but a dirty mixture of guilt and a need for control. Even so, something has changed. For the first time, he doesn't seek to justify, but to understand. The next morning, before dawn, Adrian leaves the hotel and walks to the park. The sky begins to lighten. The air cuts like glass. He sits in front of the pond. The water reflects the red of the sunrise. He closes his eyes and in silence murmurs, "I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I need to try." He doesn't expect an answer. Only the wind responds, moving the leaves of the trees. He stays there until the sun touches his face. Then he gets up, adjusts his jacket, and tells himself, "Tomorrow, finally, I will speak." But deep down he knows that it will not only be before a judge, but before the only person capable of giving him back or taking away forever. The last shadow of humanity he has left. The LA County Courthouse awakens, surrounded by journalists. Cameras have been waiting since before the sun came up. The cold lights of the flashes cut the icy April air. At the entrance, a line of women watches in silence, some with small signs that say, "Not one more." Valerie arrives accompanied by Julian and Clara, dressed in a light gray coat, her hair pulled back in a low bun. She walks without looking at the reporters, her head high and her steps firm. Every camera click sounds like an echo of the past, but this time she doesn't tremble. Inside the building, the marble of the lobby returns the sound of heels and the murmur of lawyers. In the main courtroom, the judge is already seated, microphones on, folders open. On the other side, Adrian Morales waits, his face tense and his suit impeccable, trying to maintain composure while the world watches him. The judge announces the start of the hearing. His voice resonates in the room. "Morales versus Cruz case. accused of assault and domestic violence. Valerie takes a deep breath. She remembers Clara's phrase that morning. Don't shout to be heard. Speak to be believed. Across from her, Adrian avoids her gaze. During the first few minutes, the defense lawyer tries to reconstruct a version where everything was a misunderstanding, an exaggerated marital argument by the press. The words sound hollow. In the audience, some shake their heads in disbelief. The prosecutor stands up, unfolds the evidence, photographs, testimonies. The video captured by a guest clearly showing Adrian's hand raising the whip. A heavy silence falls. Valerie feels the air thicken. On the screen, her own figure appears, her face bowed, the blue dress, the look of fear. She closes her eyes for an instant and forces herself to look, not out of morbid curiosity, but out of justice. Adrian looks down, his jaw clenched, his hands violently intertwined. When the judge asks for his statement, he stands up with visible effort. Your Honor, he begins, that night was not as they describe. I lost control. I didn't intend to hurt her. The judge interrupts him. But you did. Adrian swallows. Yes, I did. For the first time, his voice breaks. Lauren told me Valerie was trying to humiliate me. Rage blinded me. The name Lauren floats in the air like a poison. The prosecutor raises an eyebrow. Are you blaming a third party for your violent conduct? Adrian shakes his head, his eyes moist. No, I blame myself. But she knew how to use my pride. Valerie watches him without moving. There is no hatred in her gaze, only an infinite distance. The judge asks her to speak. She slowly stands up. Her voice trembles at first, but then becomes firm. I am not here for revenge, but for truth. What happened that night was not an accident. It was not a misunderstanding. It was the consequence of years of fear, silence, and shame. And today, I don't come to ask for punishment. I come to ask for respect. The entire courtroom listens in absolute silence. Clara watches her from the second row with tears in her eyes. The prosecutor asks permission to call an additional witness, Julian Vance. When he enters the room, the murmur grows. Some recognize him for his business prestige. The judge asks him to testify. Julian speaks with serenity. I was there. I saw what happened. But I am not here only as a witness. I am here because this man, he points to Adrian, is a son of the same system that for years taught us to be silent. And because Valerie's father, a man I knew in the war, saved my life and asked me for one thing, to protect his daughter's dignity if the world had ever made her doubt her worth. The entire room is silent. Adrian raises his head, surprised. What are you saying? Julian looks him straight in the eyes. That your victim is the daughter of a hero whom you never would have been able to look in the eye if he were alive. The words are like a broken mirror. Adrian loses color. He slumps into his chair. Valerie, confused, looks at Julian, who smiles sadly. Your father is watching you, and today you are fulfilling his promise, he whispers. The judge calls for silence. The moment lasts only a heartbeat. Adrian asks permission to speak one last time. I just want to apologize, he says in a hoarse voice. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Valerie, but I need to say it. She looks at him for the first time in the entire hearing. Don't seek my forgiveness, she replies calmly. Seek your own. The judge calls for a recess. In the hallway, journalists swarm, but Valerie doesn't speak. She goes out to the inner patio, where the air smells of rain. Julian catches up with her. He offers her a bottle of water. You have been braver than many men in my life, he tells her. She smiles slightly. I don't feel brave, just tired. Tiredness is also a form of victory, he replies. When the hearing resumes, the judge announces the precautionary measures, and the process continues its course. Adrian doesn't speak again. His face has become an empty mask. Outside, the women from the group clap, not with euphoria, but with respect. Clara is waiting for them at the exit, with a hug that smells of home. Valerie takes a deep breath, looks at the clear Los Angeles sky, and thinks of her mother. of the river that kept flowing even if no one looked at it. For the first time, the sound of the applause doesn't hurt her. It is a clean sound, without judgment, without guilt. A sound that resembles freedom. In cell number 12 of the Federal Correctional Institution, the silence weighs more than the iron. Adrian Morales wakes up with the first ray of sun that slips through the bars. 3 months have passed since the trial. 3 months since he heard his name pronounced alongside the word guilty. The gray walls have no clock, but his body has learned to tell time by the noises in the hallway, the keys turning, the breakfast cart, the steps of the guards. In the corner, on a small table, there is a notebook and a sealed envelope. He wrote it days ago, but hasn't had the courage to send it. On the envelope, in trembling handwriting, is Valerie's name. He gets up, washes his face with cold water, and sits down. He looks at the paper as if it weighs tons. He takes a breath and starts a new letter. Valerie, he writes, I don't know if these words deserve to leave this place. I know I hurt you and that no apology can erase it. But there's something I need to say before silence devours me. He stops his hand. He remembers her face in the courtroom, the firm calm of her voice when she told him, Don't seek my forgiveness, seek your own. Those words haunt him like a constant echo. Since then, he has stopped drinking. He has stopped blaming others. Every night, when the yard is empty, he repeats in his head what he couldn't say out loud. I failed you because I was afraid. And fear, when disguised as power, destroys everything it touches. At noon, the chaplain enters his cell. He is a thin man with a patient smile. Have you written anything today? He asks. Adrian nods, and the chaplain sits beside him. Don't write to ask, write to understand, he tells him. Adrian puts down the pen and sighs. I don't understand how I got this far. No one falls suddenly, the chaplain replies. You fall step by step, and sometimes prison is the first step up. Adrian smiles for the first time in days. He thinks of that idea of ascending from the fall, as if guilt could also have a ceiling. In the afternoons, he attends the reading workshop. There, he meets men who, like him, live between rage and regret. One of them, an elderly man with a white beard, tells him, The punishment doesn't start in here. It starts when you stop recognizing yourself. That phrase hits him deep. Adrian starts reading compulsively, books about justice, about redemption, about silence. He discovers that there is more strength in remaining humbly silent than in speaking with pride. On one page, he finds an underlined line that shakes him. Forgiveness does not absolve, it transforms. That night, he can't sleep. In another corner of Los Angeles, Valerie receives an envelope with the prison stamp. She looks at it, without opening it. She has been trying to live for weeks without looking back. Clara House is now more than a refuge. It is her home. Clara encourages her to coordinate a new project, a center for women with children, a space where no one has to choose between fear and freedom. Valerie accepts, although she still finds it hard to believe she is capable. When she finally opens Adrian's letter, she does so with cold hands. She reads slowly. There are no excuses, only a naked confession. I expect nothing from you, he writes. Only that one day you can remember my name without pain. Valerie rests the letter on the table. She looks at it for a long time, and then carefully folds it. She doesn't cry, but a knot comes undone in her throat. She doesn't feel compassion. She feels closure. That night, while the other women have dinner, she goes out to the center's patio. The air smells of rain and wet earth. She looks at the starless sky and realizes that forgiveness is not a gift you give, but a door you open inward. She murmurs softly, I forgive you, but not for you, but for me. Clara watches her from the window with a silent smile. In the prison, Adrian finishes his 10th letter. Each one is different, but they all end the same. Thank you for looking at me when everyone hated me. He puts them in a box that he gives to the chaplain. If she ever wants them, give them to her, he says. The chaplain nods, but promises nothing. That night, in the yard, Adrian looks up at the sky and sees the moon over the walls. For a moment, he feels it closer than he thought possible. One day, he receives an unexpected visit. It's Julian Vance. The guard opens the door, and Adrian is speechless. "I didn't come to humiliate you," Julian says. "I came to fulfill something I owe your father." Adrian looks at him bewildered. Julian continues, "Your father and I worked together years ago. He was a just man, tough, but with honor. He believed that a man could fall, as long as he knew how to get up. I didn't come to save you. I came to remind you that you still can." Adrian doesn't know what to say. He just nods, and for the first time, he feels that someone has looked at him without hatred. When Julian leaves, silence fills everything again, but this time it doesn't weigh so much. Adrian takes the notebook and writes, "Today, someone spoke to me without contempt. Perhaps that is also a form of forgiveness." He puts away the pen, lies down, and closes his eyes. The murmur of the prison fades. The lights turn off, and for the first time in a long time, he sleeps. Elsewhere in the city, Valerie looks at the horizon from the window of Clara House. The damp rooftops reflect the moon. On the table, Adrian's letter rests next to the photo of her father. She thinks of everything lost and what still remains to be built. She lights a small candle and whispers, "Thank you, Dad, for teaching me not to give up." The fire trembles, illuminates the paper, and she smiles. In the background, the clock strikes midnight. But for Valerie, it is the beginning of a new day. In that clean silence, the past no longer pursues her. It simply exists, without pain, like a shadow that has finally learned to remain still. The dawn arrives with a new clarity. In Los Angeles, winter is gone, and the city smells of hot bread and jacarandas. 6 months have passed since the trial, and Clara House has changed its rhythm. On the walls, there are new photos, new voices, new women. Valerie is no longer just a resident. She now coordinates the center with a serenity that surprises even Clara. Every morning she arrives before anyone else, opens the windows to let in the fresh air, and prepares coffee for everyone. On the dining room table, on a checkered tablecloth, there are always fresh flowers. "A house is healed with the smell of life," she repeats. The others nod, not knowing that the phrase was born one night, when she was still trembling at the memory. The center's expansion project has begun. It's called Lighthouse, an idea of Valerie and Julian. A new space on the outskirts, with workshops for mothers, classrooms for children, and a small library. When Julian proposed she direct it, Valerie hesitated. "I am not a leader of anything," she said. He smiled. "You have been since the day you said enough." Since then, they work together every week. He provides the contacts and the funds. She provides the heart. Sometimes they argue, but they always end up laughing. Between them, there are no promises or awkward silences, only respect and a complicity born of shared pain. One morning, while reviewing documents, Valerie receives a letter. She recognizes the handwriting before opening it. The chaplain's. Inside are several sheets folded carefully. They are Adrian's letters, the ones he never dared to send. Clara enters just as she holds them in her hands. "From him?" she asks frankly. Valerie nods. "Will you read them?" "I don't know," she replies. Maybe not today." But that same night, when silence fills the building and the lights are off, she turns on a lamp and opens the first one. "Valerie," the letter begins, "I have learned to listen to what I once scorned. Silence. Guilt. Waiting. Every day I write so as not to become the man I was again." She reads it entirely, without crying. Then she picks up another. "I am not seeking your forgiveness," the second one says. "Only that one day, when you think of me, you don't feel fear." Valerie closes her eyes and takes a deep breath. In those lines, there is no manipulation, only weariness. In the last letter, written in more trembling ink, Adrian confesses, "I have understood that my worst punishment is not this cell, but remembering the gaze of the one who still loved me while I lost myself. She places the paper on the table and whispers, "I no longer hate you." For days, the letters remain silently on her desk. She neither keeps them nor burns them. They are part of her story, but no longer her burden. At a center meeting, she speaks to the new women. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means stopping living inside the pain. One of them, a young woman with dark eyes, raises her hand and asks, "And if I can't forgive?" Valerie smiles. "Then at least start by not hating yourself." Clara watches her with pride. In the following weeks, Lighthouse is inaugurated. Neighbors, volunteers, and local journalists attend. In the speech, Valerie doesn't mention her past, but everyone feels it is there, invisible, shaping every word. "This place," she says at the end, "was not born from suffering, but from the will to turn it into something that serves others." The applause sounds sincere, and among them, Julian watches her with contained emotion. After the event, they are left alone in the center's garden, among lavender pots. "Your father would be proud," he says. She replies, "And so would you." Julian shakes his head. "No, I was just passing through. You built this." That night, Valerie walks through the illuminated streets of Los Angeles, with no fixed destination. She enters a small cafe, orders a hot chocolate, and sits by the window. She watches people pass by, laughter, everyday gestures. For years, she had believed she would never feel part of the world again. Now she understands that life doesn't wait, but it does forgive those who choose to keep walking. She takes a sheet of paper from her purse and begins to write. Not for anyone else, but for herself. "I have survived, and now I know that living is not winning. It is learning to breathe without fear." Days later, she receives a call from the prison. Adrian has been transferred to a reintegration program. The chaplain asks her if she wishes to send a response. Valerie thinks for a few seconds and says, "Yes." That night, she writes a brief letter. "There is no punishment that can give you back the past, nor forgiveness that can erase your pain. But I wish you peace, because hatred no longer belongs to me." She signs it without hesitation and sends it at dawn. As she does so, she feels that something inside her finally settles. Time moves on quietly. The center prospers. Women arrive from all over, some with children, others with invisible scars. In the patio hang colorful garlands and laughter that sounds like freedom. One afternoon, while watering the plants, Valerie receives a visit from a journalist. He wants to write an article about the project. "Could you tell your story?" he asks. She replies, "There is no my story, only many are stories." As night falls, when everyone is asleep, Valerie sits by the window of her office. Outside, the moon illuminates the newly placed sign. Lighthouse, Support and Hope Center. On the table, next to her notebook, rests Adrian's last letter. She hasn't opened it again, but she hasn't hidden it either. She observes it for an instant. She smiles with a new peace and murmurs, "Thank you for the lesson." Then she turns off the lamp. She wraps herself in the warm silence of the place she has built, and thinks that perhaps forgiveness is not an ending, but a beginning that is pronounced without a voice. In the street, the spring air brings the scent of the city, and Los Angeles, for the first time, feels like hers. The sun falls on the city with a golden glow that seems to bless everything. The city is dressed in celebration for the upcoming festival, balconies adorned with colorful decorations, streets full of laughter and music. Valerie returns after a year, with a calm heart and a light suitcase. The train arrives at the station at noon, and the warm air hits her face like an old embrace. At the station, her mother, Teresa, waits for her with a bouquet of flowers and a smile that trembles on her lips. "My daughter," she says, "how beautiful you look." Valerie laughs and replies, "More free, Mom." They hug without haste, as if time did not exist. They walk through the streets until they reach the old White House. Everything is still the same. The lemon tree in the patio, the red tiles, the smell of freshly baked bread coming from the corner. In the dining room there is bread, cheese, and olives. Teresa pours wine and sets out 2 glasses. "Let's toast," she says. "To what?" Valerie asks. "To the miracles we didn't know we were waiting for." They laugh, and the echo of the toast fills the room with a familiar and tender sound. Valerie looks at her mother and understands that the fear that separated them for years no longer lives there. In the afternoon, they go out for a walk in the neighborhood. Neighbors greet her, some with curiosity, others with affection. "Vega's girl is back," they murmur. In the square, children play football. A guitar sounds in the distance. Valerie stops in front of the river and contemplates the reflection of the sky in the water. "I have changed," she says softly. Teresa nods. "Yes, but you are still you." Valerie smiles. "I don't want to forget everything that happened, Mom. I just want it not to hurt anymore." "And it doesn't hurt anymore," she replies. That night, the house smells of jasmine and garlic soup. Teresa prepares dinner while Valerie reviews the plans for Lighthouse, which she plans to open a branch for in her home state. "Are you bringing your project here?" the mother asks. "Yes, I want other women to have a place to start over." Teresa sighs, proud. "Your father would be happy." Valerie looks up, and her father's name no longer weighs on her. It only brings her calm. An old tune plays on the radio, and mother and daughter exchange complicit glances. The next morning, Valerie visits the cemetery. She brings white flowers and the same serenity she never had before. She kneels in front of her father's grave. She cleans the dust from the marble and whispers, "I fulfilled your promise." The wind moves the flowers, as if the air were answering. Then, before leaving, she leaves a small envelope next to the tombstone. Inside is one of Adrian's letters, the briefest one, the one that says, "Thank you for looking at me when everyone hated me." Valerie leaves it not out of compassion, but as a symbol of closure. As she stands up, she feels something invisible settle in her soul, like a door closing softly. That afternoon, Julian arrives from Los Angeles. He calls her before appearing at the patio door with a bottle of wine in his hand. "I couldn't miss this festival," he says, smiling. Teresa hugs him as if he were a son. "Come, there's freshly made pie." Valerie looks at him with affection, with that mixture of gratitude and peace that doesn't need words. "And Lighthouse?" he asks as they pour a glass. "It grows slowly, but firmly," she replies. "Like things that are worthwhile." They sit in the patio, among the bougainvillea, and the silence they share is not awkward. It is the calm of those who have already survived the noise. At nightfall, they go out to the festival. The sky is covered with lights. The lanterns twinkle. Horses parade. People dance. Valerie wears a white dress with light blue polka dots, simple and elegant. Teresa walks beside her, holding Julian's arm. In one of the booths, a group of musicians plays, and the air is filled with applause. Valerie closes her eyes and lets the rhythm run through her body. When she opens them, she sees her mother laughing, Julian raising his glass, and she feels an immense gratitude for being there. Alive, present. A local journalist approaches her, recognizing her from the trial news. But she raises her hand kindly. "Today, I am not news. I am just part of the party." The man smiles and withdraws. On the dance floor, Valerie dares to dance. Her steps are clumsy at first, but she soon finds the beat. Julian watches her from the table, applauds, and Teresa also gets up, joining her voice to the music. Valerie's laughter mixes with the sound of the guitars, with the perfume of wine and flowers. When the music ends, the sky fills with fireworks. The colors illuminate Valerie's face, who looks up as if the past were igniting and dissolving in the air. Julian tells her in her ear, "You are the proof that the light always returns." She replies, "The light never left. I just learned to look at it." They walk together along the riverbank. The river shines under the moon. Quiet, eternal. Before midnight, they return home. Teresa says goodbye with a kiss and goes up to her room. Valerie stays in the patio, alone, listening to the distant murmur of the festival. She lights a candle and places it on the table, next to a vase of jasmine. The fire trembles, casting soft shadows on the whitewashed walls. "For all those who survived," she says softly, "and for those who are still looking for their voice." She closes her eyes, and for the first time since that night in the city, her breathing is completely serene. When the neighborhood clock strikes midnight, a warm wind passes through the patio, making the leaves of the lemon tree dance. Valerie smiles. In the distance, the fireworks draw a final burst of light, and in that instant, life feels new, clean, possible. The city sleeps under a sky of jasmine, and the echo of her laughter, mixed with the murmur of the river, seems to say that pain transformed into something deeper, into a luminous certainty that always, even after the longest darkness, the light returns home. Did you ever believe that Valerie would find the strength to confront a man as powerful as Adrian, let alone find forgiveness for herself? The most dangerous prisons are often those we build with silence and shame. Valerie's journey proves that the fall of an empire often clears the way for a personal, more meaningful kind of building, a sanctuary for the soul. If you were in Adrian's place, would you have sought forgiveness, or simply faded away? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that reveal the secret lives and stunning transformations of the world's elite.